we're very fortunate to be joined by a man who played 76 games for the North Queensland Cowboys and 150 games for our Warriors. Welcome to the show, Warrior 126, Micheal Luck. How are you, Mike?
Good, mate. Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate the invite and, looking forward to it.
No worries.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. So we'll go back to the very start of the career. Can you tell us where your rugby league journey started for you, where you grew up, and who was your junior club?
Yeah, so I'm from a little town about 100 k's west of Brisbane called Gatton. So it's it's a little farming town, about 5,000 people, and now that's obviously 30 years ago. Now it's now nearly a suburb of Brisbane that people that can't afford to live in Brisbane to go and move out there and commute into town. So I had my first game I think when I was 9. I was under 9s when I first played, and I was a pretty big kid, so I sort of went okay from an early age, and started making rep teams. Nearly under 12s. I think I made a Darling Downs rep team, and it all kicked on from there. So I don't get back to Gatton much now. Most of my grandparents have passed, and my parents have now, they're actually up here in Townsville. Came up just before I left to New Zealand. So I haven't been back there much, but it's a nice little place, a good place to grow up.
You went to Kerwin State High School. And whilst there, you were selected for the Australian Schoolboys in 1999, alongside other NRL notables, Braithen Nasta, Corey Parker, Jamie Lyon. What was that experience like? Because you guys travelled to England and France that year, was it?
Yeah, we did, yeah. I haven't thought about that for a while. Yeah, we had a crack side. I think there was 26 of us that went, and I think 15 played first grade, and probably 10 blokes played Origin out of that team. I was a really good age group. That age group of mine, and the one above me. So, Mark Gasney and Jamie Lyon, Brent Tate, Corey Parker, Justin Hodges. That's off the top of my head. There were a couple of really good players in that team. So we had a 6-week tour of England, Ireland and France. And so I was still 17, but there were a couple of guys that were 18 in that team. So we had a pretty good time over the few weeks we were over there. But, first time I'd seen snow. And I didn't make the test team. So we played midweek games against club sides, and then the test against England, or Bala, it was British Academy or whatever it was called. So I was playing the midweek games where we'd win 60-0 or 70-0. So I had a great trip. No one got near us. And then on the weekends, we'd just be there to support the other boys and go a bit of sightseeing in the days off. So it was a wonderful trip. I remember, I missed my Year 12 graduation, and then to be on that tour, and we got back only a couple of days before Christmas. So, it was a really, really good trip. First time or second time I'd ever been overseas. So, magic. And some good guys come out of it too. So.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome experience. Will you make your NRL debut in round 10 of the 2001 season for the North Queensland Cowboys in a 24-22 loss to the Northern Eagles? So what's your memories of your NRL debut?
I've got a couple. Remember back in the day, they used to have the Rugby League week in the magazine.
Yep,
you get the ratings in the back, so you open up and they have a little spiel about the game. And I remember when I looked at that, the little blurb about the game, whoever was writing the column said it was the worst game of football in living memory. So I remember that. I remember it was a wet evening up in Cairns, of all places, to make your debut. But I do remember in the side we played against, the Northern Eagles, which is the amalgamation of Manly and North Sydney. Jeff Tuvey played, and John Opawati and Steve Menzies, and some of those guys. And just now you look back and you pinch yourself that you got to play on the same field as those guys, because they're genuine legends of the game. So I loved it because it was my first game. But so that week, so Tim Cheens was our coach then, and we had a pretty bad trot through the next month or so. I remember being in a room that the players called a meeting, I don't know, a month into my first grade career, and it was actually a vote on whether we thought Sheensy should be sacked as coach or not. And I went, geez, I don't want any part of this. I love the bloke. He just gave me my debut. I'll make the good match payments here. I don't want to vote him out. He might keep picking me.
wow.
But yeah, eventually, not long after that, Tim was giving his marching orders, and then a guy named Murray Hurst took over as coach, and he lasted about, I don't know, 15 or 16 games, and a couple of games in the 2002 season, he was stood down, and Graham Murray was then installed as coach. So I think in my first 20 games of NRL, I had 3 different coaches, and I was going, it's a cutthroat world, but it's a good introduction. It was good grounding for me to it's a performance industry. If you don't perform, you don't last long. I think that was a baptism of fire for me in understanding that pretty early.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, some insight.
That's unreal.
Yeah. Wow. And it's hard because I was 18 at the time. I think I debuted on my day after my 19th birthday, I think. I had no idea what it was all about. It wasn't on a big money contract. I might have been on a 25 grand contract or something, and making a couple of grand a game match fees. So I loved it. I was having a great time. I had a pocket full of cash on the weekends. I'd go and shout all the boys that I went to school with. But then you just walk into a meeting where you got some guys that had played Origin and played Test match footy, and they're talking about the future of their coach, and it blew me away. So very good lesson in how cutthroat and how ruthless pro sport is right from the get-go.
It's funny how naive we can be too, isn't it? Like when we're that young, because we had Petahiku on last week, and he was telling us about when he first came into first grade. Someone asked him who his manager was, and he didn't have a manager. He didn't know what a manager was. He didn't know what it was all about. So yeah, it's quite eye-opening to see these things going on in the background. Everyone remembers their first NRL try. Do you remember yours?
I don't.
Okay.
To be honest, I should, because I didn't score that many. I think. It was at Leica? Is it? Were you going to say that?
I was going to say, like many people that we have on who play for other clubs before they come to the Warriors, they tend to score their first try against the Warriors.
Oh, so really?
You scored your first try round 13 against the Warriors, 2001. So I'm guessing you don't remember much about that game.
No, well, back in those days, so I don't know if you boys have ever been up to Townsville. Back in those days, that was when the Cowboys were the easy beats, I guess, and we enjoyed our nightlife, probably more so than what we did during the daytime. So if I did score a try, I'm guessing, did we win that night? I guess maybe.
You won comfortably. You absolutely gave it to us that night.
Probably didn't remember much of the next few days, to be honest, because it would have been one of the few wins we had, and we used to celebrate them pretty well. So it's good bit of trivia. I'll keep that in my back pocket.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, you played 75 games for the Cowboys over 5 seasons. But you weren't part of the team for the semi-final run and to the grand final. So you signed with the Warriors for the 2006 season, immediately after the grand final. How did that move come about?
It was a bit different the way I remember it. I was sort of up and down in first grade in 2004 and the start of 2005. It was sort of mid-year, and I was called into the coach's office, and he said, look, you're going okay, but there's nothing here for you next year. So at that stage, I guess I was doing one subject at uni here at James Cook University, and it was sort of a big reality check because I didn't really have anything else. I was only 22, 23 at that stage. And so I, very quickly got my head around the fact that I might be back in the workforce sooner rather than later. I was still playing, 15 or 20 minutes on the bench every weekend. And Kevin Campion, who I played with at the Cowboys the year before, who was then Ivan's. It was Tony Kemp was the coach of the Warriors in 2004. Was Ivan the coach in 2005?
2005,
yeah. So, and Campo rang and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Mate, I don't know. I'm not doing much." And he said, "Do you want to come over here?" So at that stage, that's when I wasn't married then, had no kids, really had no ties here, and so I spoke to my manager then and said, "Do you want to give the Warriors a ring and see if there's anything there?" And again, it was an opportunity. It wasn't good cash, and nor should it have been, because I was sort of a bench player or decent reserve grade player at best. And so that was about 12 rounds into the season. At that stage, I'd played 10 first grade games. I signed with the Warriors early one week, and I never played first grade year again. So I then played the rest of the season in the Queensland Cup. Our Queensland Cup team was a pretty good side that year, ended up winning the Queensland Cup, but it got to finals time, and the old rules in the Q Cup were that you had to play more of Q Cup than you did of NRL to qualify for the finals. So I ended up playing, I think from memory, if I played 10 first grade games that year, I played 9 reserve grade games, so I didn't play any of the footy, and that was the year. So our reserve grade team won the Queensland Cup, and our first grade team played in the grand final against the Tigers. So to be honest, I was counting down the days before I could get out, because I knew I'd played my last game in sort of late August here, and I knew that there was a fresh start for me in Auckland. And it was great to see a lot of guys that I knew and had played a lot of footy with having great success. I was ready to go. So a fortnight after they played that grand final in early October, I think in 2005, I was on a plane to Auckland, and threw myself into it straight away.
The move to New Zealand must have been a bit of a culture shock, going from that beautiful warm weather of North Queensland to the cold and wet of Auckland.
So I think it was maybe late October 2005 that we landed over there. I landed over there late on that midnight flight that gets in. We were staying at Nathan Feen's place for the first week or so till we found somewhere to live. So I think Feeny came and picked us up. It could have been a Friday night. We got over there, and I was freezing straight away. First thing we did on Saturday morning, I went to Dressmart Onihaga, and I bought about $500 worth of warm clothes, because I didn't own a tracksuit top, a pair of jeans that I wore going out Saturday night, and that was about it. So I remember that vividly. That was the first thing we did on Saturday. Went and had brekkie, and then went shopping. Absolutely culture shock. I mean, I guess, I was very naive and very sheltered growing up. I sort of never left too far from where I grew up, and that's down in Gatton, which is, a white working class town, farming town, and then came up here to Townsville. I guess I probably thought every brown person in New Zealand was a Maori, and I'll get over there and I'm surrounded by Tongans and Samoans straight away. And it's a big eye opener, but one that I loved from the get go. I think we might have went into the Warriors set up on maybe the Monday, say. I've been there 2 days, and I would just remember how welcome I was made to feel from everyone from straight away. So Ivan was the coach. I'd never met Ivan before. I talked to him on the phone. I knew Campo. Who else was there? Johnny Ackland was there then. And then all the S&C staff, and then the players started dribbling day by day. It was just unbelievable. So, it's a big move, I guess. A big move for anyone to move countries. And we ask young kids to do it over here now. And I guess, I was 23, so I had at least had a couple of dollars in my pocket to get myself by if things went wrong. But I just still remembered how vulnerable I felt when you get off the plane and, you don't know where you are, and you don't know anyone around you. But I can't say enough about how the people over there made me feel welcome straight away. I'm just so fortunate that I had that group of friends and group of people at the Warriors that just sort of pulled us in straight away. And there was myself, George Gaddis, Grant Ravelli, I think all came in that one plane load over, and all of us just loved it from the get-go. It was awesome.
Yeah, we obviously did a few things right, because you make your club debut for the Warriors in a round 1 loss to Melbourne. So you became Warrior number 126.
Yep.
So what memories do you have of your Warriors debut?
I remember it was a sunny afternoon in Mount Smart, and I remember that was the last game I ever played where I didn't take my head up. So I never used to, and obviously played the next 7 years with it done, and that was because that game I went and made a tackle and my left ear nearly got ripped off. Then the next week, I think from memory, we played at Parramatta. We played Parramatta at Hamilton, I think.
Yes. Correct.
And I wore headgear that night. And I used to ring Dad after the game, and he'd give me good critical feedback. And I think we might have just lost to Parramatta. Anyway, I rang him and said, "What do you think, Dad?" He said, "If you wear that headgear again, don't come home for Christmas." I said, "All right, done." So that was the last time I wore headgear. I take my head up from then on. My debut game. I think I don't know the score, but I don't think we were we were badly beaten, and that was a good Melbourne Storm team.
Yeah, 22-16.
Yeah, so I think we took plenty out of that game, and that first sort of. Did we get stripped salary cap points or something just before that?
Yeah,
like a couple of weeks
I was
before.
Say,
so.
Yeah, that 2006 season, we did start with, I think,
4
we were
-4. Yeah. So, that was interesting. And I guess, but Ive was always great with that. There was never any pressure on us to go and chase points or anything like that. We're always about building and what we were going to do. And then that 2005 season, I think we finished the year pretty well. And from memory, if we wouldn't have had those points stripped, we would have snuck into the 8, which I think was a good result. We had a lot of young guys, a lot of, I guess, guys like me that not rejects from other clubs, but just guys looking for an opportunity. And we all sort of got in and dug in together with the guys that were there previously. And I just remember it being such a good environment to play in, to train in. We spend a lot of time on the road. I just remember how much fun we used to have. It was never a burden. I guess selfishly for me, I didn't have a family or anyone to go home to, but even, we get home from a weekend away, and if you ask guys to come and, we go and have a beer somewhere when we got home, there'd be half the team there straight away. We enjoyed each other's company so much. And I think the core of that team then stayed together for 5, 6, 7 years. And that's, that was a pretty good period for the Warriors. So.
Yeah, well, as you said, there was a really strong finish to that 2006 season. We won 8 of the last 12 games, and we only missed out on the finals because of those 4 deducted points. So that must have given the squad a really big boost heading into the 2007 season, because we picked up some key players there with like Wade McKinnon and these kind of guys as well.
Yeah. Like, I guess it's now, that's, what's that, 15 years ago nearly. It'll, all the pre-seasons sort of fold into one. But, I remember, I reckon that could have been a pre-season where we started really doing a lot of endurance training. And Craig Walker, who Ivan brought over from the Roosters to be our head of conditioning or head of performance or whatever his role was, he was from the old school Roosters, like Ricky Stewart school of training, where those blokes would get belted, and he tells legendary stories of that old team of the Roosters where they had Morley and Crocker and Fitzgibbon and those guys, where they go and do 100 metre sprints and then have 10 minutes off and do 50. They do 20K worth of interval training on a day. I think that 2007 pre-season, that was the year we sort of ramped up a little bit. We started doing longer volume type sessions, and I guess I never had fitness problems, but I never really loved running until then. And I think that pre-season was the one where I really got my head around what being an endurance athlete looked like, and then that I ended up being okay at that. So that's sort of the role that I found myself in then the next 5 or 6 years, where my role was just to start the game and stay on and not make mistakes and not miss tackles, and just hold the middle of the field and, not have to make an interchange there. So, I remember that being the start of that era. It was pretty good.
The end of that 2006 season, you got named Clubman of the Year. That must have been a pretty huge honour, considering the pedigree of some of your teammates.
Yeah, and Clubman of the Year, it's always it's the ugly stepsister award. He was okay on the field. He wasn't most improved, but we'll just give him.
He's a good bloke.
Good bloke.
Hey, Roger was Clubman of the Year last year. It's not a bad.
I'm not saying that. Roger's the best player in the comp by a long way. So, I guess again, selfishly, I had no family. My wife. Now my wife hadn't come over yet, so I never was home. I was always around the club and just doing things with players, and I guess my attitude from that year is the kind of players that I'm looking to sign now for this group in Townsville. The glue, I guess. The ones that they're pretty selfless and just would rather be at work than at home. So. That was me. And, so George Gaddis and I lived together in a little townhouse in Ellerslie, right next to the Southern Motorway. So even when we were home, you couldn't sleep because the freeway noise was right next to your window. So, it was good time. Such good memories from that period. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, the 2007 season sees us finally return to finals footy for the first time since 2003. So what are your memories of that season in particular? Because we had a fairly good start, a bit of a barren middle, and then we came home with a wet sail there, finishing the top 4.
Honestly, I don't remember much apart from the 2 finals games. I remember because we went out in straight sets, I think, right? We had that first game at home against Para.
Parramatta on the Friday.
And what I do remember is that was the first, sort of blackout, Mount Smart blackout of my era there, and just blown away, about how passionate, how rabid people were that week, and that was amazing. And then 07, did we get beaten by the Titans maybe the week after?
No, we travel up to Townsville.
Oh, right. How do I forget?
And remember, they made us wear the black jerseys in the afternoon heat.
I remember that. So, I shouldn't forget that. So, obviously that was a homecoming for me, and I was looking to sort of square up on the team that I felt had punted me a couple of years earlier. And so my mum and dad, they as I said, they moved up to Townsville. They were Cowboys members straight away, and they had seats in the sort of western stand just behind the opposition bench, which they still do to this day. I'd seen mum and dad. We went up there on the Friday for a Sunday game, so I saw mum and dad on the Saturday and caught up with them. And then I got to the footy, and we went out to warm up. We warm up on the main field, and I look around, and mum's wearing a Cowboys jersey, and Mum. Your number one son. We're playing a qualifying final. She's loyal. So so that day, I remember that we came out, and one of the first tackles of the game, I had a pretty big head collision and had a massive cut across here that I had to go off, and they wrapped up. And then I think we were sort of in it till just before half time, and we conceded a couple of soft tries just before half time, and it was one-way traffic after that. So, not a great homecoming. I remember because we had a charter flight, we had to get back to Brisbane. And so I got on that plane still with bandage around my head, and the Doc Mayhew said, "I'm going to have to stitch that up. It can't wait." I said, "All right, well, we lie down, we lay down put up the armrests in the seats, and I lay down 3 times. And Doc Mayhew didn't tell me that at altitude you bleed a lot more. So we laid towels down the floor underneath my head, and he stuck anaesthetic in it, and it just started pissing blood for, it took him 20 minutes longer than usual to stitch it because it was bleeding so much. So didn't take me too many beers to get happy that night, I'll tell you. But unhappy homecoming for me, that's for sure.
I know how you feel seeing family members wearing the opposition jersey. I played junior grades for North Sydney and got as far up as President's Cup and reserve grade. And my sister and brother are mad Manly supporters. And when we played Manly, they'd rock up wearing their Manly gear. So, I know how that feels. That's shocking.
Yeah, and you know what? Dad didn't wear a Warriors jersey either. He was wearing a neutral shirt. He had a white shirt on. I said, "Dad, where are you?" That's people up here. And you know what? And that's, I guess we'll talk about that later on maybe, but that's why I came home, because when you find your way into someone's psyche or what, this community up here is about rugby league. There's nothing else. There's no union, there's no AFL. It's rugby league, and that's what the great thing is about this part of the world. So, it's disappointing to see that, but in retrospect, it makes me appreciate, this club and this region so much more.
Yeah, that 2007 season, your great club form is rewarded with a call up for the Queensland State of Origin squad as injury cover. Unfortunately, you didn't get to play. But what was that Origin camp experience like for you?
I was only there a couple of days, so I think we played the Titans on a Saturday night, and then Neville Costigan, who was on the bench for that Queensland side, he broke his hand on maybe Sunday, and I know Nev well now. He lives up here in Townsville, and there's still debate about how he did that. They said he did it in a training incident. Knowing Nev the way that I do, I reckon he might have did it in a barroom incident. But I don't think the truth will ever come out. So I went and
Facebook, wasn't it?
No. It was, I guess, mate. And Nev stayed in camp the whole time. So I got called in maybe Monday, so I only had 2 nights in camp before the game. But again, just blown away to be in the same hotel room as the calibre of some of those guys. And that was the start of that great Queensland Origin dynasty with obviously the guys that are my age, so Tatey and Parker and Hodges and those blokes that I already knew, and Cameron Smith's a year younger than me, JT's a year younger than me, so I knew all those guys. But the older blokes, he still had Pricey was still there, I think. Webke and Sidney Seaver and those guys. So it's amazing. It's just it's like a crash university course in a couple of days on what it takes to be a professional and compete at that level. So didn't get to go on. I think Queensland were already up 2-0 at that stage in that series. So I think they lost that night that I was there. But it was still, it was a great night to be a part of and play at Lang Park and be on the bus with them and their families and all that sort of stuff after. So wonderful.
I think you were desperately unlucky to not get another call up there.
Yeah, I think so too.
For the Queensland team.
Just part of that era, and they had Dallas Johnson who played in that middle forward role.
He got knocked out that night as well.
He did, one of the first tackles. So he was unconscious and
could have used you
on the bench. Yeah, I know. I would love to play Origin, but you're never going to have any drama with not getting picked for some of those guys they had in that era. They're just a wonderful period for Queensland Rugby League. And, hopefully we're at the start of that again now with some of the guys we've got coming through.
Yeah, fingers crossed for sure. So you're again named Clubman of the Year at the end of 2007 season. So again, it must be just an awesome feeling knowing that you're held in such high regard in the club. Yeah,
absolutely. I can't say it anymore. I love the place. I had such a great time there, and the club was great to me. The people there were good to me. I had a great network of friends outside of footy as well. The Kelston boys, good mate of mine, Dave McDermott, and all that crew from out there. And the illicit boys up on K Road, we used to knock around and play touch in the off season, and so they had that crew, and then got a good group of friends down in Mangere Bridge, Darryl and Rhiannon Bolton and all those guys down there. So I was never looking, never felt lonely. That's, I guess, in reflection now, one of the best things about being in New Zealand is that just everywhere you went, everyone always made you feel at home. They welcomed you into their home, and for a meal, for a beer, for whatever. And it's a lesson that I've taken out of that from my own life. How the kindness of other people make your life so much easier. I hope now that's what I'll be able to demonstrate and be an example to my boys, so they do that when they grow up.
Wow, that's awesome, bro.
Yeah.
The 2008 season, we finished with a flurry. We win 7 of our last 8 games, finishing 8th. And we went to Melbourne and create history by being the first 8th place team to beat the minor premiers under that McIntyre system. What do you remember about that game?
Because that's probably the most replayed game. I don't watch a lot of old games, but whenever there's a Storm Warriors game coming up, they always tend to replay that one. So, again, a really courageous effort, and we were probably written off, and no one gave us a chance. And everyone remembers that try that Whitty scored at the end that Manu and Jerome set up. It was a really good day, and we had a bit of a rivalry already with Melbourne. I think and that was the period where I guess there was a perception that they played pretty dirty footy, and wrestling, the grappling and all that sort of stuff. So I remember, Ian Henderson, before that game, was playing hooker for us, and he was nearly beside himself during the game, just about how much he wanted to win and how much he wanted to beat Melbourne at their own game. And if you watch that game, you have a look how aggressive he was and some of the stuff that he was doing in tackles. He probably should have had some time in the sin bin at times during that game. But it was wonderful. Really good night. And then I hope we're going to talk about it. We get to go home next week and we play that game against the Chooks at Mount Smart. One of the fondest memories of my career was that game that night. And yeah, everyone always, they show the big hits of Ruben Wiki and Sia Soliola. That's probably the biggest highlight of that game. But I just remember, Lance scored a good try, and Aidan Kirk, winger we had then, capped it all off for us. And, and the running joke we used to have was, so Kirky scored the try, and sort of lay on the ground by himself for 20 seconds because everyone jumped over the top of him and went and celebrated with the crowd. And Brent Tate, who's a good mate of mine now, Tate, he was the first one. He sort of jumped straight over the top of Kirky and went and led up to the crowd. So, it was awesome. Such a good night. Yeah, it's a really, really good memory.
Rob, was there a question you wanted to ask about that try?
The try. Just going back to the previous week, the Michael Witt try where he held the ball up above his head. I mean, what were you thinking when you saw him doing that? And also, what did Feeney say to Cam Smith when he was on the ground? Did you catch any of that spray?
I don't know. You try and lip read him every time still it comes on. I don't think it was very kind, put it that way.
No, I don't think so.
And to be honest, boys, I was that tired at the end of that game. I had, so a couple of games, probably a month ago in the season, I broke a collarbone that year and went and had a x-ray on it. And it was sort of a thumbnail piece of collarbone at the end of this shoulder. And the doc said, look, you can let it heal, which is probably a 6-week sort of process, or we can go in, we can take that bit out, and then we can just strap your shoulder up, and once your wound's healed, basically you can play again. And so I opted to do the second option. Went in, had surgery on about a Tuesday, and I played 10 days later. I think our last game of the year was against Parramatta, over at Parramatta, and then we went back. So I only played half a game-ish against Para, and then I'm not sure if I went the distance that day at Melbourne, but I just remember being so tired, like so underdone, because I hadn't trained, I hadn't done any contact work, hadn't barely trained for a month, and just so relieved to get that result. So got through, and then we played the Chooks and won, and then we got beat by Manly, like annihilated by Manly. And so that's the year that they were all in the Calves blood. So I work with Glenn Hall now, who played for that Manly team. And so if you look back at that Manly semi-final series, so I think they beat St George in week 1, 32-6. They beat us, then they had the week off. They beat us in week 3, about 36-6. Was it the same score, something like that? Yep. And then they won the grand final 40-0. And then after that, that's when they had the controversy about the peptides and all that sort of stuff. And whenever Hawley gets cheeky and has a few beers and it reminds me that he got a premiership ring and I don't, I said, mate, that belongs to me because you were cheating that year.
It must have been a bitter pill to swallow, though, to fall just short of that grand final.
Yeah, and I think more so for Ruben. That was Ruben's last year. That ended up being Ruben's last game. It was a pretty heavy loss. So, as a team, it was disappointing, but more so for Rubes, I guess. You never want to see a legend of the game go out like that. And, a disappointing way to end a really good season. We started that good run of wins in his 300th game at Leichhardt, midway through the year. So, I think that's when we all grew the beards and all that sort of stuff, and we sort of used it as a tribute to Ruben that last couple of months of the season. So, I was more upset that we couldn't deliver Ruben a premiership the way that a bloke like him deserved to go out.
Well, unfortunately, heading into the 2009 season, tragedy strikes when Sonny Fire is taken.
A little visitor.
Hey, mate.
Hello.
Hey, mate. How you going?
Saying hello. You want to go to bed now? All right. You should have been in bed an hour ago. Sorry.
No worries. 2009, unfortunately, tragedy strikes with Sonny Fire is taken by the sea, trying to save his younger brother and cousins. That must have been a real difficult time for the club there.
Yeah, it was. Horrible. And I guess we had a few older guys sort of leave us that year before. So that was Rubes' last year, and there were a couple other guys. Maybe that was Waringy's last year too. I can't remember, but what I do remember is that there was a lot of young guys that were all part of Sonny's crew, like Russ and Kevin Locke and Benny Madalino and those guys that I guess just this was just out of the blue for them and something that they hadn't had to deal with. Like none of us had, I guess. And it was a horrible time. I remember that first day of training, we went in and Donnie Mann was the footy manager, told us what had happened and, asked if we want to go out there. And straight away we just jumped in the cars and went out to Bethel's and, we were there for a couple of days looking, and I think, the realism set in after day 2. And I guess, then it was about just supporting Sonny's family and his partner at the time and all that sort of stuff. And that was another example to me of how wonderful that Polynesian culture is around the grieving process and all that sort of stuff. I was blown away about how much support that was around, the whole community at that stage. So, horrible time. But again, the best part of people. Sorry.
That's all right, mate.
That part was just, I guess, an example to me again of how to treat people when they're not feeling their best. And around Saint's funeral we had down there and what happened after that, I'll never forget that. Just how it was a horrible situation, but almost will end up like a celebration of a young man's life, like it should be. A wonderful young bloke, cut down his prime by saving his brother. There's not much more you can say about it. There's no, just it explains what sort of bloke he was and how he was brought up and how his family is,
Yeah, that whole season was pretty much a write-off too. I think 7 wins and 2 draws, and the form was pretty erratic. It was a win scattered amongst, consecutive losses in that.
Yeah.
Do you think Sonny's death impacted the squad that deeply that footy just became not as important that season for the boys?
Yeah. And I often think back now about how it could have been handled differently and how we could have approached it differently and done things differently. I don't think we could have. I think it happened so suddenly and so tragically and so close to the season that I don't think there's any crisis management platform you can use to try and overcome that.
Everyone does differently too.
That's right. Yeah, and the way that I process things like that is very different to how Benny Madalino did it, very different to how Steve Price did it. So there was all of us sort of going through this journey together and everyone handling it differently. And, I remember halfway through the year, I think, we weren't going great. And Ivan was coming under pressure about, he was doing a poor job and all this sort of stuff. And that was another example to me of how ruthless the world that we're operating in is. It's a performance business, and there's no excuses for poor performance. So I think, again, in hindsight now, I'm really grateful to the administration of the club at the time for letting us get through that year and let us stick together. And, we got out the other side of it and we were a better team than in those couple of years after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned Steve Price earlier. Well, the following season, 2010, Pricey announces his retirement due to an ongoing heel injury, and he didn't actually end up playing any games in 2010. What was he like as a player and a captain?
Obviously, his record speaks for itself. So, Pricey was the premier middle forward of his era, I guess, and started the preference for dominant, big meter middle forwards. And then, if you look at the comp now, there's not that many that go and tune out. We've got a pretty good one here in Jason Tamalolo that does a fair job. But across the game now, there's, it's probably more even with meter gaining, and a lot of that comes from outside backs. And, Roger's the best example at the Warriors. He's the fullback, and he has most meters a game. Hands down. So, but back then that was the year of punching through the middle and playing fast footy. And Pricey was the benchmark for that for a long time. And I guess as a captain, he was he led by example. He led by example at training and during games, and he showed us what meant to be professional. Pricey, I guess, was a famous teetotaler when he played, didn't have a drink. And, we always had the joke that you go around to Pricey to have a beer with his wife, Jo, because she was better company than he was. Pricey, he showed us what it meant to be an NRL player. And everything he did, his whole life was revolved around getting ready for next week and get ready for next week's game. And he played till he was older-ish as well. I think he was mid-30s by the time he gave it up. And there's a reason for that, because he looked after himself, and everything he did was about getting ready for the next game. Awesome experience to be able to be captained by him and play beside him and behind him for as long as I did. Certainly there's some great lessons that came out of him that I probably didn't get to put into practice because I retired at 30. But now I see guys that I'm responsible for day to day. And, I just keep going back to that. If you can't play up like an idiot from Monday to Friday and expect to play well Saturday night, and Pricey was the one that was probably the first one that penny dropped for me to watch how he did things and how then he was able to play consistently for so long. So, it was great, unbelievable. I was so lucky to play beside him.
Yeah, he was a massive signing for us. I remember how excited we all were when he first came to the club too.
Yeah.
That 2010 season, we bounced back from the disappointment of 2009. Finished the regular season in 5th spot, and then we played the Titans, and we're beaten by them in that first semi-final, and have to wait for the results of the other games. And as luck would have it, I think it was the Raiders.
Yeah, we got done, didn't we?
I think
I remember that.
And the Roosters beat the Tigers in that Golden Point.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. What are your memories of that time? Because finishing 5th, we probably thought that we'd be around for the second week of semis, and bang.
Well, I remember. So I think we might have been the Friday night game.
We were
over the Gold Coast.
The first game. Yeah.
So we only needed one of the teams below us we needed 2 teams below us to win, and you would think 1v8 was a gimme. So I think we went home licking our wounds, but thinking we were going to be okay. We got off the plane in Auckland, and one of the teams had lost that we needed to win, and so I think from memory,
that would have been the Roosters Tigers game.
Yeah. So
that was the first game.
Then I said, well, we may as well go and have dinner or have a beer or something and wait for the result of the second one. The second game, I think from memory, I was in Ponsonby somewhere. We used to hang out at Grayling RSA a little bit, so I might have been up there, near there. So I think then the second game turned, and then that was nearly the first days of mobile phones. So the text just went out and said, boys, not much we can do today, and I'd better go and celebrate the season. So, it was a tricky way to go out, but I guess you get what you deserve, and we should have beaten the Titans that night over at the Gold Coast, and that time of year it's sudden death footy. So, I guess good experience for a lot of our younger guys that might have got a chance in the future, and we're better for it next year. Still bedtime.
Just while we're still on 2010,
we go to bed at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
No, he's the one.
No, we actually do.
You sustained a nasty injury against Manly at Brookvale Oval in round 24.
Yep.
What happened there?
Oh, leg. Just making a regulation tackle, I think, and my sort of lower body swung around. I hit Anthony Watmo's boot, and he sprained his ankle. We both ended up in the Manly change room together, and he had I think a high ankle sprain, and mine was a bit more gruesome than that. Just took the top layer of skin and flesh off my leg, and ended up that's a good memory that night. So I went to Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney. I still had all my kit on. Turned out the ER, the doctor in charge of the ER that night was a Manly fan and had been at the game. And he sort of said to me, "Are you in much pain?" I said, "Not really, but I'll take painkillers if you're going to give them to me." So he gave me the green whistle and said, "Here, I'll get to you when I can. Like, we're in a triage situation. We'll get some weird things happening here tonight. So just hang tight and I'll get to you and I'll say up when I can. So I sat there with like an open wound on my leg and just with towels and stuff wrapped around it. And every so often he'd come and nudge me and say, all right, got a live one coming in. You know, there was people that had, you know, high on ice or, you know, just crazy stuff. So they get the overflow from what happens in King's Cross that they couldn't fit in St. Vinny's in the middle of Sydney. So yeah, it was a wild old night. And then he finally got to me, I think, mid-morning on Sunday morning. And Laurie Hale, who was our gear manager at the time, so Loz is still there at the Warriors at the moment. Yeah, he stayed behind with me, and I stayed in hospital that night, and I was in a ward with 3 old ladies. And that was a rough night because you know, those old ladies are pretty sick, some of them. So as soon as daylight next morning, I rang Laurie. I said, mate, I'm getting a cab. We're going to the airport. Let's just get on the first plane home. So I checked myself out of hospital and we went back to Auckland. So yeah, I haven't thought about that for a long time. Thanks for bringing that up. It was a fun night.
Yeah, no worries at all. We're moving on now to 2011. Our season started out quite emotionally with the Christchurch Earthquakes in February of that year. Do you remember the emotional tension within New Zealand at that time?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And because a good mate of mine, Corey Laurie, is down there. Corey played at the Warriors 2008, 9 maybe. And he'd gone back down there and he was heavily mixed up with the Hornby Panthers. And I think over at Hornby, they didn't have a lot of damage in that part of town, but you know, everywhere else, obviously devastated. So we went down there later in that year and we did a few fundraiser things. And I just, again, remember how at that time, how resilient Kiwis are and how welcoming everyone is of each other and how supportive they are of each other. You know, like people were donating stacks and stacks of money and whatever they could to help make things right. So, again, just to, you know, I'm not just saying this. So New Zealanders are wonderful, wonderful people. And it's no surprise to me that, you know, New Zealand got through last year with the COVID stuff better than anywhere else in the world because everyone is considerate of each other and, you know, they want to make sure that their neighbours looked after them. That was very, very apparent that early 2011 when the earthquake happened.
Our run to the finals that season is set up with a run of 9 wins and 11 games during the middle of the season. Aside from the finals campaign, which we will discuss in a minute, what are your memories of the actual season proper?
Now you put me on the spot. No, I reckon it was a year that we started playing. I guess we'd still been sporadic, and yeah, the Aussie commentators, I'll say it until they're in their graves. It's the Warriors. They'll come out full of blood and thunder, and then they run out of gas after 10 minutes, and their forwards are unfit, and all this sort of stuff. I think that year was the first year. And really probably only year in my time there that we actually played good, consistent footy, throughout the year. And I think we had a good, what we did have was a really good squad. So not only a good top 17, but we had great guys in underneath that. And, I still say to this day that I got to play a couple of games with Johnny Thurston. I played with Shawnee Johnson. I played with Stacey Jones, one of the best halves ever to live. And, I played with Brett Seymour that year. And Brett Seymour was one of the smartest halves I ever played with. It was like having a coach on the field when you had him beside you. And then when he was in the reserve grade team, the team that were preparing you during the week, it was like you had a Dally M winning halfback playing against you. So the way that he prepared for us to play against opposition on the weekend was unbelievable, and I think that made us play good, steady footy. And Jimmy Maloney had a good year that year, and that's the year he matured, and he went from being a clown that just would joke around all the time, and that's sort of the year that he stepped up and took the bull by the horns, and said he stamped himself as an NRL champion, and we didn't win that year, but he won one a couple of years later. So a great roster we had, and again, just a really good group of blokes that both on and off field that we had a lot of fun with and loved spending time together.
We mentioned his name earlier, but there was a young kid by the name of Sean Johnson who made his debut in round 13 that season. So what do you remember thinking when he came into first grade?
I was skeptical. Like I saw the kid that, headgear wearing touch player. And I thought, he was good in those old 20s teams of the Warriors because they just used to destroy everyone. And I was really skeptical of how he'd go in first grade. But turns out that he went okay. So, back then I was super proud of how him, Kevin Locke, Russell Packer, Benny Madaleno, all those guys that were only 20, 21, they were playing some high-pressure games and coming up with some big plays, and Shawnee, I guess that finals game in Melbourne, when he put Louis Brown over for the try that ended up winning it, that's a massive play for an experienced half, let alone a rookie. So, there's some blokes in playing the game that can do things that are very, very rare. And Shawnee can do it. Benji Marshall could do it. Kalen can do it now. I guess I was lucky that I played with Shawnee in his years where he still had no fear, and he was unencumbered by weight of expectation or anything like that. And he played some wonderful footy that year.
Yeah, we finished that season in 6th spot. How did it feel making the finals again? And did the quick elimination of 2010 seem to come back and haunt you after that Broncos loss in that first semi?
Oh, not really. We knew we had an off night, I think, we got back in the sheds after that game and Manu was distraught. I think Manu dropped a couple of balls that night and he was just so upset. I guess he was out if we were going to get another chance. He'd make up for it. And, I think he did a great job the following week to pick himself up. And that was, again, the evolution of Manu, to go from, a guy that could have good weeks and bad weeks. And he had a bad night that night in Brisbane and then picked himself up and was enormous for the rest of that final series. So, not really. I thought we got beaten. We got beaten by a better side. They played good footy. We didn't play great. I guess the lessons of a couple of years prior where you get knocked out without getting a second crack, that's the one that sort of reinforced. If you do get a second go, don't waste it. So, we didn't. And the next week we went over the Tigers, so that was a good win.
Yeah, it was.
Well, luckily we didn't get dudded by the McIntyre system because both the Cowboys and the Knights were beaten to Manly and Melbourne respectively. So we progressed through. So it was how difficult was it to move on from that performance to leading up to that Tigers game, as you said, because obviously a lot of pressure there?
Well, to be honest, for me personally, not very. So we played that game maybe a Saturday, got home Sunday. My first son was born on a Tuesday night, so I didn't train Tuesday. My wife was up in Auckland Hospital. She got induced at 10 in the morning, something like that. So Murph ended up arriving at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. I think we played the Friday night in Sydney, so I didn't train Tuesday, Wednesday. And we travelled Thursday. So it was a whirlwind week for me and, wonderful week, birth of your first child. So, it ended up being a really good week. So I wasn't popular when I got home on Saturday, and I've only been there for probably 16 hours of his 4 days alive, but I'm grateful that I got to be there when he arrived. And it was just a wonderful end of the week, the way it all finished up.
Yeah, I was at that semi-final against the Tigers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. A lot of my close mates are all Tigers supporters, so they got me tickets in a Tigers supporters bay. I'm sitting there wearing my Warriors gear. I was quiet all game right up until the end. Such an iconic victory in the club's history. What do you remember about that game in particular that final try by Christian?
So I remember about the game. I remember we got caned by the referees. And I don't know the penalty count or whatever, but I do remember coming off the field, exhausted because it just felt like we'd done so much defence. And those Tigers sides, they used to like throwing the ball around a lot, So you felt like you're always chasing against those Tigers teams. And then I guess we hung in until late enough. And, that last try, a bit controversial. But, Chris, the freakish things, he was another guy that could do things that other guys couldn't. And, was skillful enough to be able to pick that up and score the try. So, a great end. And I guess one that probably 60 seconds earlier we were thinking we were going to be packing our bags and it was all over again. So, it was a wonderful week.
I think that game was the debut of Waddy Holmwood, the serial streaker as well. The guy.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Big fella. Yeah. Yeah, it makes me feel better about myself by looking in the mirror naked. Yeah.
Well, the following week we travel to Melbourne and we grind out one of the best wins in the club's history. Tell us your thoughts on that game and your fantastic try assist in the first half.
Probably the only one I ever threw. Again, we sort of go with Melbourne to Melbourne with nothing to lose. I guess no one expected us to even go close to them. It's one of the iconic Melbourne sides of all time. We had the game that troubled Melbourne. I think I always think they struggled against us to run the plays that they used to in the middle of the field because we had some really good middle defensive players. And, I know that we used to do a lot of video work on their trick shots that Cameron Smith and Billy and Cooper Cronk could put on. And we had some guys, that was obviously my job. Aaron Heron-Wise, a wonderful middle defender. Russell Packer was fantastic. We had the game that troubled them. So we were always sneakily confident when we went over there. And we saw if you stay in the fight long enough, you never know what can happen. We ended up staying in the fight long enough, and Shawnee sort of put Louis over right at the end, and that sealed it. So, and Jimmy kicked the goal that put it out, and that's always great when you're in a finals game when you're home with a couple of minutes to go. You can't get beat. It's a wonderful feeling. So, it was a great night and a great trip home, and then a great week in Auckland before. I think we had to go back to Sydney on maybe Wednesday or Thursday. So we had 4 days in Auckland before we went back over. And it was so good. Awesome. Really, really good time.
I was going to ask, qualifying for your first NRL Grand Final, describe those emotions and that whole week, that whole Grand Final week, and what the atmosphere was like back in New Zealand. And then later in the week when you came across for the game.
Yeah, for me personally, I probably knew the end was close for me. And in hindsight, if we would have won that game, I reckon I would have retired then. I really valued it because I'd played 11 years in the NRL at that point. We had 11 seasons and had never got to one before. So I knew how rare they were, and that's what I tried to get across to the rest of the guys. And I guess, one bloke that I haven't spoken about at all is, a bloke that I've hardly got a higher opinion of anyone on the planet than Simon Mannering. And Junior was, I was trying to, Junior and I are close, and that's what I tried to get across to him that week, that, he was young and he was going to be captain in an NRL Grand Final, and you don't know, they don't come around often. So, empty the tank, everything we do this week, let's do it as best we can and give ourselves no regrets about, what we could have done better. So we did that. We threw ourselves into everything, into training and, all the promo stuff we had to do. I remember that. We just enjoyed it. It wasn't a burden. We didn't look at it like an onerous task that was going to take us away from what our goal was. We just enjoyed the whole week. And, I remember they have that sort of Grand Final parade thing down at Darling Harbour. Might have been the Thursday or Friday maybe, and it's a circus. There's people there and they're grabbing you. It's like the red carpet at the Oscars that just people you never see all year, and all of a sudden they want to interview them. Before we got off the bus, we said, "Boys, enjoy this. Make sure that you take your selfies and all that sort of stuff, and make sure that you're having fun this week because you just don't know when it's going to come around again." So. Apart from the result of the week, it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week of my life. Yeah, I'll never forget it.
It's good that you say you got to enjoy it a bit, because we've spoken to a few guys from the 2002 team for the lead up into their grand final. We spoke to Jimmy Maloney a few weeks ago as well, obviously about the 2011 grand final, and most of them kind of said that the week was a blur. Like it just went by so fast. But it's good that you said you were able to sort of sit back a little bit and take it in.
Yeah, I guess it only comes with being older and being experienced. And, as I said, I probably knew subconsciously this was going to be the only one I ever played in, because I knew that next year we were losing some players, we were losing a good coach. I just didn't know whether we were going to be as competitive in 2012 as what we were in 2011. And, I probably made a vow to myself that I was going to enjoy it, whatever came at us that week. I think that I didn't feel tired when the game came around. A lot of people say that in their first grand final, they feel buggered by the time you run out on the field just because you've used up all that energy. I didn't feel that way. I felt great when game time came, and we just ran into a better side that day in Manly. They just played better than us and deserved the win. So disappointing end to what was a wonderful year. Yeah.
I was at that grand final, that 2011 grand final. There was definitely more Warriors supporters than Manly supporters, that's for sure. And I think the fact that we had all three grades playing was contributed to that as well.
Yeah.
Leading up, like even at the Tigers game, we got to participate in a massive haka before the game. But were you guys aware that was going on, or was that something that you guys had no idea was happening?
Yeah, no, we knew. And we were inside when it happened. We weren't out warming up, but we got mail that it was happening. It lifts the team. It lifts your spirits to know that you got that much support in the grandstands. And you're right. There was more Warriors fans in the crowd that day because everyone hates Manly except if you're from Manly anyway. So if you barrack for any other team, you're a Warriors fan that day. There's a photo on my mum and dad's wall of us lined up shoulder to shoulder for the anthems, and just in the background, it's almost a sea of black over in that eastern stand at Olympic Park. It was wonderful. It was such a good day and good lead up, and as I said, just couldn't come up with the result at the end.
Do you have any memories of the game itself? Obviously, being the first and only grand final you played, anything that stands out to you from the actual game itself?
Oh, I remember how quick it was. It felt like the first, I think we scored, we kicked penalty goal was the first point scored. And then, I think that was maybe 10 or 12 minutes in. And it just felt like that had been 2 sets of 6, But what I do remember is that period before halftime when they went bang bang. And I don't think I've ever watched that grand final in a full replay, but you see it from time to time. Like in grand final weeks, I'll have it on and I'll sit there and watch that 10 minutes before halftime. And I guess now looking back, I'm a bit dirty at myself about a couple of things that I could have done that potentially would have changed the way that those plays unfolded. So I guess you always got regrets about things you've done in the game and what you could have done better. But it was, just the game was quick. It was high quality from memory. And at the end of the day, in the key moments, Manly were better. And that's why they won.
Yeah, they're probably the form team of the comp all year too.
Yeah.
As we all know, Ivan Cleary was moving on at the end of that 2011 season. How did you find him as a coach?
Yeah, I loved Ive. And still, talked to him a couple of weeks ago, when we'd gone through a rough trot here and rang him for some advice on a few things. I just always found, I know that the media and people that don't know him well can find Ivan a bit aloof at times maybe, or, not really engaging. But once you play for him and you earn his trust and earn his respect, there's no more loyal bloke on the planet than Ivan Cleary. I really valued, I guess, his loyalty and his calmness and his consistency. In the 7 years or 6 years I played under him, I can only remember him really blowing up, like, proper throwing the toys out of the cot only a couple of times. And I think that's why, as a team, we became better and more consistent ourselves, because we reflected that of our leader, I'm just so happy he's having the success that he is now. That Penrith team, they're 3 lengths ahead of any other side this year. You see a lot of his coaching philosophies in how they play. Like they do, they've got a left edge full of rock stars and Kikau and Luai and those and Brian Tottle, but the way that they play and the control that they play with, that's Ivan all over it, So if we don't win the comp, I hope they do. So just to for him, he gets the reward that he's been chasing for so long.
Yeah. Following the success of the 2011 season, there was obviously very high expectations with the club on the verge of something big. But unfortunately, our 2012 season, we finished 14th with an 8 wins, 16 loss record. And Ivan had moved on, as you said, and Brian McLennan had been appointed head coach. What do you attribute the massive form slide to?
it's hard to put your finger on one thing in particular. I think, Bluey definitely had a different philosophy to Ivan in his coaching style. And, I think a lot of it was around playing attractive, entertaining footy. And, I think, what I do know now is that's awesome, and that's how you win games, and that's what I love watching Penrith play, because they're an entertaining team. But you got to earn the right to do that first. You can't go and throw trick shots from play one in the NRL, because it just doesn't work. You have to go forward, and you have to make your tackles, and you have to look for a vulnerability in your opposition before you can go and do some of the things that we might have been trying to do a little bit early. But we lost a couple of players after that grand final as well, which always happens in a salary cap era. That depth of the squad that I talked about earlier. So I think after the 2011 season, those second guys that backed us up so well in 2011, like Jeremy Lattimore, Brett Seymour, Sean Berrigan, those type of guys, they all left. Which made, and I understand now why it happened. Look, the Warriors had a gun under 20 system, and there was a lot of pressure there to make sure they kept signing those guys and make sure that they were still in the system, and that comes at the expense of older, more experienced guys sometimes. And maybe in hindsight, had to be a bit more selective of who they kept from the older blokes and then who they brought up from the younger guys. So so it's not down to one thing in particular. I just think a perfect storm happened, and we didn't deal with adversity that well, and end of the year we finished at the bottom end of the ladder, which is disappointing.
Yeah. April 2012, you announced that season, the 2012 season, is going to be your last. You only managed to play 6 games that season. Was that as a result of an injury? Yeah,
so 2 injuries. I broke my hand in that 2011 grand final.
Yep.
So I went and I think maybe November-ish, so it was a month after grand final. I had a plate put in the top here to try and anchor it all up, and then so that should have been right. Should have recovered. I should have been right for round 1. Because of that, I was modified training and was still doing all the con stuff, but I just wasn't landing on it in my hands. I was taking weight on my elbow. Just before Christmas 2011, we're doing a commando drill, so laying a line of 3 and jumping over and rolling under, landed on my right elbow, and that collarbone that I talked about earlier, that had that piece taken out, the rest of it all ruptured. So it was 22nd of December 2011, I went in and had surgery. I had an anchor put in. They took a piece of my hamstring in my left leg and tied my collarbone back to my scapula in that shoulder. Had a bolt put through it to hold it. So I've got a photo on Christmas Day 2011. So my son was 3 or 4 months old. And I had Stu Walsh, who's a surgeon who did the surgery on my shoulder. He was around at our place Christmas morning having breakfast, just checking, cleaning the wound. So I had an open wound on my shoulder with a bolt hanging out the end to try and fuse that all together. So that was that. And then just about came good from that in sort of March. And then had another contact injury and shattered the underneath of my wrist. So they went and put a plate underneath the wrist. So yeah, I don't think I didn't play a game until
it was round 15.
Yeah. So yeah, it was 3 sort of 2 injuries that had 3 surgeries within the space of 4 months. That was what kept me out, and that last, I was never going to come right from my shoulder injury, and still to this day, there's things that I can't do. And I just, my son was going to turn 1 that year, and I said, if I want to be any part of these boys' lives in an active capacity when I'm in 5, 6, 10 years' time, then this is it. I've got to, that's enough. So, cool time, and that was it.
Looking back, how do you remember your time at the club?
Loved it. And I'll say that to anyone that'll listen, and even sometimes if they don't ask, I tell them anyway. I've said it a couple of times. I just felt I felt at home, I felt that, not to get too philosophical, but they often talk about where you feel most comfortable, and where's your happy place. And, for me, that was always on on Mount Smart Stadium at a cold, wet Sunday afternoon in the middle of winter. And, you know, that because I knew that when those conditions were there and we had teams come over, we were going to win because they didn't want to be there. And I just, I used to wake up. We lived in Mount Eden. The last 4 years I was there, and I'd wake up and look out. I live straight across the road from Eden Park, and I'd look out the window of our bedroom and you'd look across, and when the mist and the rain was coming down on a Sunday morning, I just used to wake up smiling because I knew, we were a big chance that day. So I loved it, and still when I go back there, so I was asked to go back for Simon's last game a couple of years back, and then that presentation night where he was presented with all these awards and all that sort of stuff, and just made to feel so welcome whenever I'm around there. And even now that I'm the enemy now, I work for another club, and my role this week is to try and be part of the plotting of the downfall of the Warriors this weekend. But still, we'll get to the Central Coast on the weekend, and there'll be 5 or 6 people that I'll go and give a cuddle to straight away, just because I had such good time there, and loved it, and had such good experiences with everyone there. It was awesome.
Well, mate, you're always remembered and spoken about with such admiration by the Warriors faithful. You were such a tough and resilient performer, and you absolutely epitomised what a Warrior was.
Absolutely.
You moved back to North Queensland, though, to take up the elite pathways position with the Cowboys. Was there ever an offer to continue in a coaching or wellness capacity at the Warriors?
We never really got into it because I think, so when I retired, I just about finished my uni degree at AUT. So I'd done a lot of my work placement out at operations at Air New Zealand at the airport, and I fully intended to go into a role with those guys, and was just about ready to finalise everything that we were doing, and then got a call from our former chairman here at the Cowboys, and knew what I'd done and knew what I'd done at uni and what I was thinking about doing. He said, have you got any appetite to come home and try and, we've got a bit of a drama in our pathways program at the moment, and you've been over in Auckland for 7 years. You'd be a fresh set of eyes that can come in without any bias and put your lens across it, and at that stage, so Murph, my oldest bloke, he just turned 1, and he was getting to that age where if you wanted to go out and do anything, you'd have to pay someone to look after him. We had no family support over in Auckland. Had a great network of friends and that sort of stuff. But I guess it was just at that point where I talked to TL, my wife, and I said, "Do you want to go home?" She said, "Yep." So we sold up and came home, and started over here in sort of December in 2012, which sounds like a long time ago now, and sort of worked in 2 different roles prior to the one that I'm in now, and sort of, I guess, worked my way up the ladder a little bit, and now my title is head of football, which means I'm now accountable for everything that happens, from a long-term and strategic position in our football program. So it's exciting. I've got to say, the last month it's been a baptism of fire, because I guess Toddy Payton's over here. A lot of you guys know from his time over in Auckland, and we knew we probably had a bit of work to do, but I think it just came at us really quickly over the last month or so. I'm stoked with the group we've got here. We've got a really, really good young roster, and our job now is to put the resources around those guys to make sure that they excel. And I'm going to use all the lessons that I've learned over my time in the game, and certainly that period I spent in New Zealand to try and make sure that happens right.
I'm glad I could be that good luck charm for you at the Tigers, mate. Changed all your fortunes.
So for people that don't know, we hadn't won a game, and then at Leichhardt 3 weeks ago, Hammer came up and introduced himself and asked, did I want to be on the podcast, and I said yes, and we haven't lost one since. So,
not to mention the Cowboys hadn't been told by the NRL that Was at the Central Coast. At that stage, they still thought it was.
We're going to Tamworth. We're going to Tamworth on Saturday. Yeah. So
I should have kept my mouth shut.
If you wouldn't have said that, I probably would have still been planning to go to Tamworth this week.
We would have got a forfeit from it, so that's all right.
yeah. But no, it's been a fun ride. Yeah, it's been awesome.
I'm just gonna scroll through some of the comments from the people, and Rob, you can ask.
Yeah, while that happens, Michael, I'm going to ask you a few questions that we ask all our guests on the show. Who was your toughest teammate?
No question, Simon Mannering. He came in as a kid and did things just superhuman right from the get-go. As a 19, 20, 21-year-old, would play with injuries now that seasoned veterans wouldn't. Play with illness, unbelievable, absolute Iron Man. If you had 25 blokes like him on your roster, you'd never lose a game. So, yep, no question.
What about the best sledger?
Nathan Fiend.
Yep.
Yep. I actually played with a guy named Chris Shepherd early in my career. That I saw one night. We were playing a reserve grade game, and he had the opposition front row in tears because he was just relentless, just attacked him the whole game. Anytime he'd go to feed a scrum, he'd be into him. So Shep was pretty good. Nathan Fiend was cheeky, and Fiend would do his homework. He'd be pretty clued up on if a guy had a weakness around their personal life, or Fiend would get personal. So it's someone you want to bash, but you just have to get hold of the little bugger.
Biggest pest?
I'm hoping that a lot of people from my era would say James Maloney.
Yep.
I remember one day, Ivan, it was the middle of, I guess it might have been a run where we were going okay, or an important stretch of games, and Jimmy was just a dickhead. We were sitting in a meeting room trying to watch video, and Ivan said, "Jimmy, can you just go on your phone and go outside for a little while? Just give us some peace and quiet." So in the middle of a game planning meeting, I've sent Jimmy outside because he was too disruptive. So, and from what I've heard over in France, he's still exactly the same right now.
Hasn't changed.
Yep.
No, it hasn't changed at all. Yeah.
Toughest opponent?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I guess for me, I would rate the toughest guys the smarter guys. Big guys are big, and you throw your body in front of them, they trip over you. The quick guys, you just have to try and stay with them. If they beat you for speed, they beat you for speed. The ones that I would always consider my toughest opponents are your smart ones. So, Cameron Smiths, I guess, all the hookers that sort of were part of that group that changed the way hookers played. So, Aaron Payne up here, Robbie Farah, Cameron Smith, those type of guys that could beat you with speed, but beat you with smarts as well. And I feared playing those guys, but also loved it because the preparation you do that week, I'd sit watching videotape for, an hour on what they did and all their different tricks. And, you try and outsmart them defensively before they could come at you with attack. And, I love those weeks, which sounds interesting, I guess, if you're saying the toughest opponent that you also love playing against it, but I always had a ball preparing to play those guys.
What about the best trainer?
Probably Waringi Korpu. Y was a freak. Could do things that was good at distance running, was strong, was quick, was a good swimmer, all those sort of things. Just whatever he did, he was good at it. So he'd be at the front or near the front of the pack in anything he did. So Y was a good benchmark to work off for whatever you're doing.
Have you seen him recently?
I've seen him on TV. Yeah, he still looks reasonable.
He looks good, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Still works out quite a bit. Him and Ruben, they're getting younger the older they get.
Yeah, I know. Benjamin Button, both of them. It's good. Good to see him still looking good.
Team comedian.
I liked, we haven't spoken about this yet, but after a game when we used to have a carver session, and you get, so Rubes would mix up a bowl and then, because I hated carver, it tastes dirt. But I'd sit there and go and get a couple of cans of rum and coke or whatever, and sit there and just have a laugh with those boys. And Manu was always life of the party. Just such a funny guy. He's got an infectious sense of humour, an infectious smile. And I love those times after games where we'd sit down in the team room at a hotel somewhere. The boys would mix up the carver, and then we'd after that we'd sit down and have some funny nights there for sure. Manu was at the centre of that.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of questions from the people watching. Are you still a hardy Warriors supporter?
I love the Warriors, and I'll say this without fear or favour. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's my favourite player in the comp. I love watching him play. When Toddy and I have known each other for a long time, and when he was coaching him last year, I'd text him after every game and just say, mate, you've got a superstar there, and the game's so much poorer for his loss next year. I love watching the enthusiasm and the intent that he plays the game with in attack and defence. He's just my favourite player of recent times. I love him. I think he's such a good player.
What do you think about Lockie Burr? And the person that's asking that is my housemate who used to be Lockie Burr's coach when he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Lockie Burr grew up playing at the club that we were at.
Yeah, right. So Burry came up here, Toddy boy, mate. We only had one roster spot to fill by the time Toddy was a coach, and he chose to bring Burry with him, and he chose Burry for his attitude and his work ethic and just, I guess, his 1% efforts on the field. And honestly, Burry struggled a bit when he first came up. The heat really got to him, and he had some sessions in the preseason where he was cooked, and we had to go easy on him a little bit. But he's now sort of found his feet, and I think he was great for us last week. He started at lock against Canberra, who were a big pack, and did some wonderful things in defence. So he's going good. He's a disrupted year for him last year, where he was in Australia and his gear was in New Zealand. I think his partner Matty was in New Zealand for a little while.
Yep.
Yeah, he's now found his feet. He's doing really well. Good bloke.
Yeah, he is. Did you have any pre-game rituals or game day routine that you used to go through?
Not really. I'm pretty low maintenance. And I'll look at what guys do now. And it's, I guess, only since I come into my role now, I'm in charge of budgets and all that sort of stuff. And I'll look at, guys go and spray themselves with that sticky stuff all over their hands. And I never used to really worry about that. And now I know how much a can of that costs. So I start taking it off them. Boys, there's $15 a can. No, not really. As long as I had a decent feed the night before. I used to often go to a place when we had home games in Auckland, a place on, I think it's Victoria Street, straight across from the casino, little Italian place. And we'd used to go there. I forget what it's called, but we'd go there nearly every Saturday night if we were playing a Sunday game and have a big pasta meal, and I'd go to bed with a big feed of spaghetti in my belly. And game day, I was not a high performance athlete. I had half a dozen cups of coffee and a dry biscuit and a litre of water, and that'd do me. But no, nothing quirky or anything like that. No.
Spirit of champions.
Yeah.
Watched a bloke in a bar interviewing the Cheese. Just wondering how close did the Cowboys come to getting him up at Townsville?
Oh, Brandon. So Brandon was here. It's tricky, eh? So the year Brandon left, I think was after the 16 season. So at that stage, we had a premiership winning hooker in Jake Granville. Yep. And we had a guy that was a year older than Brandon that was Queensland Cup Player of the Year as a 20-year-old. His name Josh Chudley. So we had two really good hookers. Jake Granville was signed long-term. And I guess at the time, the club opted to go with the one that was proven at open age level in Chuds rather than Brandon, who at that stage had only played against his own age group. And at that stage, Chuds was Player of the Year for the Cowboys NYC team in 15 maybe, and then went and dominated Queensland Cup as a 20-year-old. And so I guess that's the other thing I've learnt, is that recruitment is an art, not a science, and you can use all the data and all the stats and everything you want, but you could sign the best player in the world and tomorrow he can go and do his knee, and then he doesn't have that spark again, or someone wants they can be great when they're on their own. They get married and their personal life's not great and they sort of fall off a cliff and all that sort of stuff. So, Brandon was a Cowboys junior. He's from Waiheke Island.
He doesn't hide the fact he was a bit of a rat bag too when he was up.
Ordinary kid at times. But a lot, when people ask me about Brandon, because I managed him when he was a 20s player, and they say, would you have Brandon back in your team? I'd say every day of the week. He's got my two favourite characteristics of what I think it takes to be a really competitive NRL middle forward is that he's blind loyal and he's violent. So the two things that, I just love about him, he's so combative and, once he's bought into what you're doing, he'll almost die for his cause. So I love him. I'm so glad that he's playing well. Just proud of him. He's won premierships and sorted his life out and, he's going well.
His brother played up there too, didn't he?
Yeah, Dylan. Yeah. So he's a couple of years older. I don't know where Dylan is now. I think he was down in Brisbane for a little while. But he was good. He's a front rower. I think that's Brandon's sort of getting that body shape now. As he gets older, he'll get bigger and bigger, and he's going to have to work hard to make sure his discipline's right to stay as quick and agile as what he is, and making him so good at the moment.
Yep. Who were your heroes growing up? Yeah, whether it be just personal heroes or NRL heroes?
I love the old Balmain sides and the old Penrith sides back in the day. So I probably started watching footy seriously when I was, 8 or 9 years old. But that was, the glory days of those two teams. 88, Balmain won. 89, Penrith won. So I love those big sort of rangy forwards like Paul Sierran and Johnny Cartwright and those type of guys. So that's from a footy perspective, but honestly, and this sounds corny, but my dad was always my hero. Dad didn't have a great privileged upbringing. He was from a farm, and he left school at year 9 or year 10 and went and helped my granddad work on the farm, and he's basically scrimped and saved and battled for every cent he's ever earned, and he did that. I know now to provide for me and my brother, and we had all of we had everything we could ever want growing up. We weren't spoiled kids, but we didn't go without anything. And now I loved him and I respect him for it back then. And I even more so today that I'm a father myself, and I know how tough it is and how much you get pulled around trying to make sure that your kids are okay. And, Dad always did that for us. Never said a harsh word about having to do it. So, absolutely, he's a bloke that I look up to probably more than anyone else.
Mate, I'm the same. My dad's still my hero.
Yeah.
Caden Rogers, this was your best guest so far. Very well spoken and articulate. Oh, yes. Can you give us a rundown? Can you give us a rundown to the jerseys you're both wearing? Oh, I'm wearing the beautiful flag jersey from 2011.
2011, yeah. And
we've got the Auckland 30-year commemorative strip that we wore in a game in 2007 where we played Manly, celebrating 30 years of the Auckland provincial side winning over Great Britain, Great Britain, France, and Australia, I believe. So, yes, I believe you played in that game as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. We won that game, I think.
Yeah, we did.
From memory, yeah. It's a good day.
Yeah, the great win that day.
Yeah.
3 more questions for you, mate. Most memorable moment in your career?
Oh, the night we beat the Roosters, 2008 at Mount Smart. It's unbelievable. It was like we were going to a rock concert. It was awesome. Yeah, still get tingles thinking about it now. We drove because we used to meet at the stadium and then we'd go over to the race course at Ellerslie and just have something to eat and chill out for a couple of hours. Then we'd get the bus back to the stadium. You'd drive down Great South Road and turn in there. I remember coming up over the hill and you just, because it was night time and you can see the lights that give the glow out of the volcanic crater. And you see people walking for miles around all in black. It was unreal. So good. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the 6 again rule?
I wish I was involved with a side that didn't give away so many of them. There's no doubt it's made the game quicker. And last weekend, geez, I reckon our blokes gave away half a dozen in the first half. And when you're up against it, and it just seems that it's not like quicksand. If you give one away and you give another one away, then you guarantee you're going to give a third one away for any infringement. So I don't know. I like the speed of the game, and I like how now that teams are starting to try and, you know, working it out, how everyone understands what they've got to do defensively to counter it when you do give one up. But, yeah, I just don't know I don't want to turn into touch. You know, there's still got to be a place for the big bloke in the game. And I think that this is putting the funeral hymns are going for the big guys now. So, I think there's got to be a bit of balance there somewhere.
I don't expect you to comment because you're employed by the NRL, so you probably can't. But for me, I just think there's too much inconsistency with it. Personally, like you see some teams get better calls than others, and that's all I'll say on that.
I won't comment on that.
No, don't want you to. Final question, mate. If you hadn't have become an NRL player, what career path do you think you would have gone into?
Good question. I guess if I would have stayed here in Townsville, I guess the guys now, so I'm 39 this year, all the guys in and around my age, they've all got their own businesses, or they're involved in, you know, they're sort of in that step where they're now middle managers in business. So, a couple of guys that I went to school with got involved in construction straight out of school, and they were chippies and, you know, block layers and that. And now they've gone and got formed their own companies and that sort of stuff. So honestly, I probably would have went down that path. There's in North Queensland, not to go too deep into it, but there's money to be made from, we've got big defence, big government contracts, big mining contracts everywhere. So there's a lot of people doing pretty well out of that up here at the moment. I reckon I probably would have fallen into that in some way, shape or form. Yeah.
Well, mate, if you had gone after that the same way you did on the field wearing our wonderful Warriors jersey, it would have been nothing but a success, I'm sure.
I appreciate it.
Mate, we want to thank you very much for coming on, chatting with us. I know you've got a young family, and, you know, to take a time out of your busy schedule, we really do appreciate it. As Rob said before, you've always been remembered as one of the greats of the Warriors organisation, and we always talk about you fondly. I wish you luck on the weekend. Not too much, though. I hope you only lose by 2 points. I'll be up there, mate, so come and say hello.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity. And, as I said, there's some of the things that we talked about that I haven't thought about for a long time. So, yeah, it's been good. We enjoyed it.
Nice. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Mate.
Easy. Bye, guys.
See you on the weekend.
We'll do.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Michael.
Cheers, Michael. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.